Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks, and today I am joined by a special guest. Welcome back.
Hi, I'm DJ. You might have seen me around the Command Zone, but also on the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much.
We've got a very fun episode. We've had some very cool discussions already, and I'm excited to share it with you. Bloomburrow introduced a brand new Group Hug Commander deck with Ms. Bumbleflower, and that's really had Group Hug on the mind around here. So we decided it's time to buckle down and do an episode about how to play this controversial and also beloved archetype.
Yeah, there's so many intricacies. We're going to really get into it so that you can build your own Group Hug deck, play a Group Hug deck that you have, know how to tweak your Group Hug decks.
Yeah. Play it with the best of the best. Of course, if you want to pick up any of the cards that we talk about today or any of the singles or sealed product from Bloomburrow, go to cardkingdom.com/command. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of singles sealed product in every condition and version and foil treatment that you are possibly looking for in your collection, which is really nice because when I'm shopping for cards, I'm buying a lot all at once, usually for a deck. And I want to make sure that they show up at the same time so I can get them sleeved up and start playing as fast as possible. And I love that Card Kingdom has the professionalism and the know-how and the staff that knows Magic cards and knows exactly what you're looking for. Plus, they ship it professionally and safely so that the cards that you order on the website are the cards that show up on your doorstep. And when you use that affiliate link, you're supporting the channel, which we appreciate so much. So go over to cardkingdom.com/command. We appreciate it so much. And while you're using affiliate links, you can also pick up some Magic accessories at ultrapro.com/command. ULTRAPRO has some of the highest quality Magic accessories, trading card accessories in the business. They've got sleeves and playmats, deck boxes, binders. I love their card sorters and dice. They've got plushes, sort of no matter what you're looking for your collection. ULTRAPRO is a huge selection for you. They've got a brand new line called Mana 8. They're super clean, big white playmats with a huge Mana logo in the middle. They're great for conventions, or if you like Magic artists, you can have people draw on them or sign them. They're super clean and sharp, and they look awesome all the time. Plus, you get to show off your favorite Magic color, which for me is white. So the whole thing is white. And I just can't eat my SpaghettiOs while I'm playing Commander.
No coffee.
No coffee near the white playmat. You can pick those up over at ultrapro.com/command. And the final place to support us is directly over at patreon.com/command zone. It's a great way to become a part of our community. You get access to extra turns and game nights a day early without ads. You can watch episodes with DJ. You were just on the cEDH extra turns, so you can check out some exclusive content at certain tiers. You can see the turn talk about that cEDH episode. And then you get to be a part of our Discord. You get to chat with people in the community. You get to chat with us. We're all in there all the time asking rules questions and talking about precons and how we're upgrading stuff. So come hang out with us, become a patron. Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode. And this one is dedicated to Blaine Hayduke. Blaine, you rock.
Thanks, Blaine.
Thank you. Thanks for group hugging us. We're going to group hug back. Today we're talking about Group Hug, and we're talking about how to play it. We're going to tell you how to build it. We're going to tell you what the strategies are, what the mindset is, how to navigate it. It is a bit of a minefield, and it is a ton of fun.
Yeah, and actually, we have a lot of experience when it comes to Group Hug. Not only have we tackled some of the precons, like you were just talking about the Bloomburrow one, but also I've built several different Group Hug decks. One of my favorite is Group Huggy Braids, my mono blue Braids deck. That's an iconic deck that I have, and so I'm really attached to Group Hug. I've had really successful Group Hug decks, and I've had Group Hug decks that failed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so navigating that whole process has really made me a little bit more attuned to what makes this archetype work and not work.
And what makes it super fun to play and unfun to play. I've had one of my oldest decks is a Feldergriff deck, which is a Group Hug deck. Started out as a budget Group Hug deck, has grown into a beloved, blinged out, ridiculous pile of Magic cards, and it still has Group Hug elements. It plays like very serious control, and it has a very silly hippo combo finish. It's a ton of fun to play, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this archetype. We're going to start with the cards, what goes into a Group Hug deck, what makes it work, and specifically what makes Group Hug hug group hug? Because I think it's a bit of a misunderstood archetype overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some people, when they think about group hug, they're just thinking about, well, I'm just hugging everyone and I'm here to give out hugs and not really here to play a normal game of Magic.
Right. They think of it sort of as like, I'm not here to win. I'm just here to give everybody resources. And it sort of hits the gas pedal and turns the game into a weird, like, 3-player game with one maniac. Which is so fun.
Which, by the way, and then here's the thing, that is a strategy. People play that. But I think that through our research, through looking at some data, looking through lots of decks online, looking through the precons, we found that the majority of players that are playing group hug or group hug strategies, they are trying to win, you know? And so the confusion comes from a very small minority of, you know, people that want to not necessarily watch the world burn, but like, you know, what did you say?
Watch it bloom.
Watch the world bloom.
I'm just here to watch the world bloom. I just want to see everyone at their best.
Everyone to be happy and just like that. You know, so we are going to address the way to play this game and the strategy, not necessarily, not always to just hug everyone, which is kind of an easy strategy, but how to play the game where you can hug specific people or group hug in a way, play politically, like ride the line between hugging people and then also like stabbing them with the dagger while you hug them.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little
at the
bit.
end, right?
Just hug them really tight.
Ooh, bear hugs.
Bear hugs. So if you're not familiar with the archetype, they're traditionally Bant, so green, white, and blue. But I would say that they vary. We've seen group hug decks with red. It doesn't usually include black.
I don't know very many. It could happen. You know what I mean? I think you could. But a lot of the precons that we've seen, a lot of the really strong commanders, they kind of stay away from black and go to the other 4 colors.
Yeah. Red adds sort of a chaos element, and green, white, blue is just like sort of sunshine and daisies all the time. Typically, they are a little slow. They accrue resources and play enchantments and don't really do anything until the late game. And the way they get there is just by being cool to hang out with.
I think one thing that's really important. Exactly. It's just like, hey, I'm cool.
I'm cool. Don't kill me. You want me. That's
one thing that's interesting is that you mentioned that they are slow, and they are, yet they amplify the power of other decks around them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because it's the group hug deck itself is the one that's committing mana, committing cards to amplifying all of the other decks. All of the other decks just get the benefits, especially in the early game. So while the other decks are sort of racing out of the gate, the group hug deck is sort of just like, look how much fun we're having. I'm giving everyone things. Everyone's performing really well and hitting their land drops. We're all having such a great time. They really amplify this power level, and they make games like bigger and splashier and wilder, but usually the group hug deck is designed to take advantage of this sort of interesting environment that they create, where everybody has too many cards or everybody has too much mana or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Before we move on, I want to talk about something that Ellieoftheveil said. She is the primary designer behind the Ms. Bumbleflower Precon, and she tweeted that group hug is a bit of a misnomer in that it's not just about being the helpful accelerator of the table with no true aim of winning. As the group hug player is doling out resources, it's often getting more than it's giving, which says a lot, I think, about what the decks are designed to do. It's giving out gifts, but it's benefiting from the gifts that you get. It's getting political reward for the gifts it's giving out. It is actually trying to take advantage.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what kind of things we give out, you know, what kind of hug effects that we have, and then that way we can sort of categorize them a little bit. I think that one of the ones, like, for example, that's highlighted by the Ms. Bumbleflower deck is just giving out cards. Right? Yeah,
I think that's a huge category, and it's something that you think of with like Dictate of Krufix, I think is a pretty iconic group hug card. So this is an enchantment for 1 blue with flash. It says at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. It's a Howling Mind type effect, but it has flash, so you're the first one to get the card back. And I still think that kind of thing is what you picture when you picture group hug. It's just perfectly symmetrical, and it's got a little bit of upside. I like that it has flash because it means you get to respond to the table, and you can be like, you know what, I'll flash it in before your draw step, so you can have another
you
card.
Wouldn't. Now here's a good strategy thing. This might be a little bit ahead of ourselves. You wouldn't flash it in just before your turn,
you
so
certainly
you get the first card.
I mean, definitely.
Would you specifically be like, no, I'm not even doing it for me, I'm doing it for you?
I'm doing it for you.
That's some next level politics right there.
Yeah,
I
mean, I like that it has flash because you can make those decisions, right? You can be like, I'm going to skip yours because you've been naughty, and then you get one. Angel. So that's a typical way that these type of decks hand out cards. But I like cards more recently because they printed more cards that are shifted more in the positive for the player. Like the struggle for project purity. Have you seen this one?
No, I have not, actually.
This one's from Fallout. Fallout, yes. So it's Struggle for Project Purity. It's 3 and a blue for an enchantment. As it enters the battlefield, choose Brotherhood or Enclave. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card. You draw a card for each card drawn this way. So that's the main mode that we're going to talk about. It also says whenever a player attacks you with one or more creatures, that player gets twice that many rad counters. So you can sort of be like, don't attack me. But mostly this is everybody draws 1. You draw 3?
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Is that going to be are people going to see through that? Because Dictative Crewfix, I'm like, it's symmetrical.
It's symmetrical.
With this one, it's kind of like, that is not symmetrical.
You're
at all.
like something. But I found with this kind of card is as long as you're giving somebody 1, they're like, I don't really want to remove it. Like, I know it's a problem.
Oh, got it.
But if I spend a card to remove that, now I'm just down cards. That's a bad deal.
Interesting.
So I think it's interesting because it's definitely a flag, but it's also one of those things that, like, am I really going to spend a card to remove that card?
And I think that that's the key too, is that like a lot of these cards, they don't seem that are symmetrical. They're like, why am I going to go down when everyone's getting the same thing?
Right.
You know? So it seems like a waste to kind of remove it or go out of your way, you know? And as a player, you're like, hey, what are they doing? They're just kind of giving everyone everything. Yeah. I'm down on resources if I go after the person that's not even advancing the board, like just advancing it for everyone, not even like becoming a threat.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's lots of ways to hand out cards. I think there's symmetrical ones like Selvala Explorer Returned, or there's one that we were talking about recently that's a little bit more targeted.
Yeah, I really like Lorn the Third Path. It's 2 and a white for a 2/1 legendary human artificer. It's got vigilance, and when Lorn the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. Tap, you and target opponent each draw a card. Now, first off, Lorn on its base, just Reclamation Sage, destroy something, perfect. Just very playable, which means that this is a political or group hug card disguised as a very playable, like awesome card that everyone has. You never have to activate this for this to be good. But the fact that you can give someone else a resource, give someone else a favor, and you can target that hug is so powerful. You know, in a game that's multiplayer, being able to choose where your cards go can be very, very strong. And so that's why I particularly like Lorn the Third Path a lot in these kinds of group hug decks, because you have more control over who's getting that present. Like we were talking about, you love Dictative Crewfix, that you get to choose who gets the first card. Right. What if you got to choose who got every card?
Every single card.
You know what I mean?
That intentionality is so important in group hug, because it's like, there's one thing that for hugging everybody and everyone's like, great, I guess you're here to sow chaos or blooms. But there's also something to be like, oh, this person wants to work with me. Like, this is more of a bond because I am specifically receiving something from the group hug player rather than I am generally receiving something from the group hug player. Like
a Dictative Crewfix, you know, it's very hard politically to leverage that because it's just going to happen. People are like, wait, I'm not going to. The cards are coming no matter what I say. But if you have it on a choice, like on a Lorn type thing, then you can actually ask for something. And say like, hey, we can make a deal here. Yeah.
I am happy to give you this card if you, leave my commander alone for one more turn or something like that. Tenuous Truce does a similar thing. It says, hey, if you and I don't attack each other, I think. If you and I don't attack each other, we'll each draw additional cards. So it's just like, hey, you can have stuff. And of course they can break that truce, but then they'd be giving up cards.
I know, right?
Free cards.
Free cards. You invested a card for this truce to happen. Yeah. Like, you're invested in this. It's tenuous stuff.
It can be broken at any time. There's also, of course, you can hand out mana. So there's one half of this is you give them cards, resources to cast, and the other half is, the mana to cast those things.
Yeah. I think one of the most popular ones is Heartbeat of Spring. 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produce.
Yep.
Mana Flare, doubling mana, that's a lot of mana. This can be dangerous.
Yes.
Doubling everyone's mana, that's a lot.
This definitely isn't a turn 3 play. Because you play it on turn 3 and pass. Now all your opponents are on turn 6 and you're still on turn 3. Not a great idea. But
I mean, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I think that this just accelerates things so much, it might have you lose control.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it might be hard to rein it back in again because this is such a powerful effect. I think that a lot of other ones that just give a little bit of mana are a little bit more controllable. Something like Pier's Whim or something like that.
That gives them an individual.
Exactly. Pier's Whim is a 3 and a green for a sorcery. Each player chooses, for each player, choose friend or foe. For each friend, searches their library for a land card, puts it on the battlefield tapped and shuffles. And then each foe sacrifices an artifact or enchantment they control.
Right. So you get to literally say, you're my friend, you can have a land, and you're my foe. Get rid of that. And I think a lot of people look at that and go, friend, foe, foe, foe.
Exactly.
Which is what the card is often played as. But I think in group hug, it benefits you to be like, we're all friends here.
Yeah.
Or we're all friends except you.
Or the table decides that, Rachel is not doing, this is not okay.
Yeah.
Your one ring needs to go. Yeah. Sacrifice that.
Sacrifice that.
And then
solved. We all get lands. We've had a wonderful time doing so.
And then suddenly you have not only have you solved a problem, but you have multiple allies.
Right. Something I want to talk about with Heartbeat of Spring, because this is an interesting card where it looks symmetrical because it doubles everybody's lands, right? But if your deck is designed to have more lands on the battlefield, if you're a turbo ramp deck, now it looks symmetrical, but if you have twice as many lands as everybody, or even 3 more lands than somebody, less than twice as many, you're getting so much more out of this Heartbeat of Spring than they are, but it looks more symmetrical than it is.
Yeah, because I am over here with my, artifact ramp and stuff like that. Yeah. And you're dumping, basics onto the battlefield. Suddenly you doubling up truly doubles up.
That's definitely, Heartbeat of Spring is one of the remaining group hug, true group hug pieces in Feldergriff, because it has that same, group hug, or Feldergriff is designed to put a bunch of lands on the battlefield to dump a bunch of mana into Feldergriff. So it's a big mana deck and is going to be able to take advantage of every ounce of mana I have, where some decks aren't necessarily designed to do that.
Fundamentally, more hippos, right?
More hippos.
Yeah.
More mana means more hippos,
that makes
which
sense.
Everybody wants.
Yeah. Yes, agreed.
Let's talk about Tempt with Discovery.
Oh, okay.
So
this is a classic.
It is. We got to talk about Tempt cards when we're talking about group hug, because they're sort of an iconic part of this. This one is 3 and a green. It's as Tempting Offer. Search your library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield. Each opponent may also search their library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield. For each opponent who searches their library this way, you also get another land. So for each opponent that takes the offer, you also get to benefit from that.
Now, this is not targeted hug. You don't like Pier's Whim or something like that, where you're like, no, you get it, you don't, or something like that. This is just kind of an offer up to everyone.
Yes. And this is a fascinating card because strictly the correct answer is never take the Tempt.
If everyone is disciplined enough to say
everyone's
no,
so strong, then the group hugs player just paid 4 mana to tutor a land to the battlefield.
So bad.
Yeah. Not a good rate. If one person, but as the group hugs player, if one person takes it, if the first person takes it, everybody takes it immediately. And now you've paid 4 mana and you've gotten 4 lands to the battlefield untapped.
So good.
My favorite thing to do with Tempt of Discovery is be like, so I'm going to cast Tempt of Discovery. So anyone can get a land if they would like to. I'm going to get one. And then I like to emphasize that it's any land.
You make sure they know that. Just any land.
Any land. It could be any land in your deck.
I mean, don't think about your basics. Think about your best land.
Yeah. Think about how good. And then because they usually go untapped, and you go, untapped. It's so good for you. It's 4 times as good for me, but it's so good for you.
I think that this speaks to some of the political nature that needs to happen, because you're talking about hey, I don't just cast this and say, oh yeah, read the card.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, by the way, so Tempt with Discovery, any land.
Yeah.
Any land, guys.
And there's usually somebody at the table who's like, don't take it.
Yes, someone says that.
And then the first person always takes it.
So what I like when people, because someone does say don't take it, I'm like, you don't have to take it, that's fine. But they're going to make their own choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
So sometimes it's like, wait, you're going to listen to the guy telling you what to do? I'm just giving you an offer.
He doesn't know what lands are in your deck. You could get a Field of the Dead.
Cabal coffers?
What? Jeez. For free.
I spent the card on it.
Untapped. It's very, like, that gives you an idea of the kind of conversations that you need to be willing or interested in having at a commander table to play this archetype. There's even group hug effects that, like, distribute creatures, like physical resources to their opponents.
Oh my gosh, I've been toying with a Cabal Profiteering Mare deck. Yes, so and I know it's so much fun, and I'm making it group huggy. A little bit because I like to give away tokens and
DJ,
these kinds of things.
This deck exactly like yesterday.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'll show you. I'll share my version with you. It looks super sweet.
Yeah.
And so when Silver Quill Lecture came out, it basically like super hyper ramped me into being like, yes, I need to make this.
Yes. Yeah.
Silver Quill Lecture is 4 and a white for a 3/3 core wizard. Creature spells you cast have Demonstrate.
Yes! I love Demonstrate.
Just a reminder of Demonstrate.
Yes.
You do the thing, and then you're like, Demonstrate says, hey, you can let someone else do this, an opponent do this.
You make them do it.
Yeah, you make them do it. And then if you do, you get to do it again.
Sweet. All you have to do is give away one of the things.
So if you give away a token, a creature token with Silver Quill, then you get to make another one too.
It's like a forced tempt, kind of.
It's great.
You're not tempted. You're doing this.
But I really like it because Demonstrate, you get to target that person, which is really good, and they don't have a choice. They just have to do it. So in many cases, you can find out where this creature is needed or whether it's useless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you get to double up your value.
Yeah, and if you have Cabal on board, then
you
get even more dope. It's
so
sweet. There's the Hunted cycle is an old classic cycle that there's sort of under-costed creatures that when they enter the battlefield, they give an opponent tokens. So like Hunted Phantasm is 1 blue for a 4/6 unblockable. They just printed a 2 and a blue 7/5 with upside.
They're a little old, yeah.
Anyway, the Hunted Phantasm comes into play. You put 5 1/1 red goblin creature tokens into play under target opponent's control. So it's like, I see that you're getting beat up. You don't really have the blockers down. Let me give you like a couple of 1/1 tokens just to defend yourself with.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, this was originally written as a downside.
Right.
But in multiplayer, I like to see this as pure upside.
Yeah.
Because if you can guarantee that these creatures are not used against you, then it's a net benefit for your strategy to win.
Especially in Feldergriff, I want them to have little things. So it's like, give them little things. That's a great rate.
Like
I can only get 3 hippos for that rate.
Here's the thing. If I say, if I have Silver Quill Lecture out and I'm like giving away something, a Sun Titan, something big and cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And my deal is, hey, don't attack me. Don't use this against me. Use it against this enemy over there. Would you agree to that?
Yeah.
That's fantastic for me.
Free
For the
Sun Titan,
net,
yes.
For the net win of the game, now I have not only made an ally, maybe gotten a political favor, but also like targeted it towards another player.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then now you're attacking someone else with your Sun Titan to get that trigger, and I'm just back here. So I've sown more chaos, caused more enemies and damage on the battlefield, and I've been able to kind of like sit back and just accrue value.
With 2 Sun Titans. One more that was printed recently. This is in the Ms. Bumbleflower Precon. It's Octomancer. This card's really fun, particularly because it's a creature that says gift an octopus. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast the spell. If you do, when it enters, they create an 8/8 blue octopus creature token. And then at the beginning of each unstep, create a token that's a copy of target creature token that entered the battlefield this turn.
If that octopus is not coming at you, like if you can play it politically or trust your friend enough, like you've not only gotten your own octopus,
great,
but you've essentially unleashed an octopus on the rest of the table.
That rules.
That's awesome.
Yes, and I love it particularly in Ms. Bumbleflower because you're like, I can give your octopus flying if you want. It's like there's so many cool deals that you can do here with this kind of thing that you don't think about. You're like, giving someone an octopus is bad, and you're like, but if you have a little bit of say over where that octopus goes, then it's almost like you have 2 octopuses.
And then also being able to have a gift to give means that you can get favors in return. Like you have something to negotiate with.
Yeah.
If you have nothing to negotiate with, how are you supposed to make political deals? You know what I mean? If you're about to get attacked, you're like, well, hold on. A turn later, I'll give you an octopus. You You know what I mean? You have something to actually negotiate with. Sometimes you want to make a political deal, you want to negotiate, you want to stay in the game, you want to have that table talk, and you don't have anything to give. That conversation can't happen.
Absolutely.
So just having a few of these cards in your deck means that you have the option to make these political plays.
Yeah. I love this kind of thing. And again, we've talked about general hugs. We've talked about targeted hugs, giving people stuff that just makes you feel like a friend, feel like a benefit to the game. Even if you're not specifically hugging like one person, they're like, this game is cooler because this person is here, because they're doing weird stuff that doesn't happen in Commander games all the time. And that's a ton of fun. Like Ellie said, the trick is to always get more than you're giving, or to give something, but make sure that you're benefiting from that gift being given.
Yeah. So we talk about symmetrical effects, like the Rites of Flourishing.
Yes,
you know what I mean? Rites of Flourishing, no.
Like the Heartbeat of Spring.
Heartbeat of Spring. There we go. You talked about symmetrical effects like the Heartbeat of Spring, but you're in a mana ram strategy where you're going to put way more mana on the battlefield, so it benefits you more. It's a symmetry breaker. And that's one thing that you're going to be looking for is like, well, am I using these tools that seem general, that seem like they're benefiting everyone more than everyone else?
Right. So like in Ms. Bumbleflower, when you're giving out cards, having a card like Psychic Possession on the battlefield that says whenever enchanted opponent draws a card, you may draw a card. Now you're giving away cards. They still get that card, but you get an additional card every time you use that Ms. Bumbleflower trigger.
Absolutely. Something similar, Fairy Mastermind. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flash flying. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. Again, breaking that symmetry, making sure that you have more cards than your opponent.
And they're separate things. You're putting together a bit of an engine. They expect you to benefit from this too. Nobody's blind to what Group Hug does. But just making sure that you're taking more advantage of all these cards. Like we talked about in the upgrade, like having a lower curve or being able to move at flash speed, having ways to cheat things into play, taking advantage of all of this extra card draw that you're giving out and that you are receiving yourself. The other way is to like take advantage of all the mana on the battlefield. We talked about having more lands with doublers. Something like a Wilderness Reclamation that untaps all of your lands is now like my mana is being doubled twice. Is really, really powerful. And obviously it's one of those permanents that like people are going to look at. But if you're using it to hand out hippos, maybe that mana isn't so bad. You can untap all your lands. Give me 3 hippos. Okay.
Throw in a Seedborn Muse too. It's fine.
Fine. I don't play Seedborn Muse because people go,
that draws the threat, but Wilderness Reclamation does not?
I think because it only does it once and it doesn't untap all of your other stuff, it just flags a little bit less as a must kill right now permanent.
We'll talk about that later, where we want to like ride that line between being threatening and being friend to all.
Yeah.
You know.
Also, if you are making a ton of mana, if you're giving everybody a ton of mana, make sure you have activated abilities or you have X spells and you're using every drop of mana that you have. If you're handing out extra mana, you need to be extremely mana efficient. So something like a Doppelgang. For each of X target permanents, create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. That's sweet. Dump a ton of mana into that, make a ton of things.
Yeah, not going to lie. I'm going to target more lands so that I even have more mana.
Sweet. I love that. I love that. Pay 5 mana, copy a land.
Sweet. All my lands are doubled. I'm going to copy more lands and they're all doubled too.
That rules. You can copy all the lands they search for on attempt.
Oh wait, I need to eventually.
I need to actually
start
win
doing things
this
and
game
win. Yeah.
at some point. It just making sure that your deck flourishes in the environment you're creating with the hug cards is a huge part of deck building for Group Hug.
I particularly like having traditional Group Hug cards that work really well in Group Hug, and everyone's like, oh, that's a Group Hug card. And then you have the combo card that goes with it that really lets you leverage it, that sort of turns it into kind of a combo and a big symmetry breaker. You know what I mean? For example, Gear Per Orrery is just a solid Group Hug card. 4 mana artifact. Each player may play an additional land on each of his or her turns. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards. This can be super dangerous because you're giving them land drops and potentially more cards.
Yeah.
Which means that this can get severely out of hand. You know,
it's a very powerful effect to give everyone at the table.
Absolutely. But if I can essentially like get this going at hyper speed, it can be really good. So for example, a card like Mana Bond is a single green mana. During your discard phase, you may choose to put all land cards from your hand into play. If you do, discard the rest of your hand.
Sweet.
So now I'm dumping all of the lands on the battlefield, and then Gurapur Orrery is saying like, oh, draw 3. You know what I mean? And I've just immediately refilled. And then I can dump and refill and dump and refill. Or similarly, Null Brooch is 4 mana for an artifact. 2 tap, discard your hand, counter target non-creature spell, play this ability as an interrupt.
Fun.
Usually that'd be like a huge downside.
Right.
But if you could just be like, all right, throw away these cards, and then I'm going to draw 3 more with this Gurapur Orrery in my upkeep.
Yeah, I love that.
Solid symmetry breaker.
And those are the kind of cards that are cool enough and are different enough that they're not necessarily going to make people respond in a really visceral way. And then they read Null Brooch and you're like, I would probably do something about this. A cool one that you included is Oath of Druids is a very dangerous magic card. It has, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if a player controls more creatures than them, they basically mill until they hit a creature and it goes straight to the battlefield. But it's hard to control who has more creatures than you, unless you're playing Feldergriff.
Do you have a single Feldergriff deck?
No, because I have Karuga as a companion, so I can't put Oath of Druids in. It's devastating. But you can build your deck with, first of all, bigger, scarier creatures.
Absolutely.
So you know that your hits off of Oath of Druids are going to be bigger and scarier and better on average than what your opponents get.
You got a Birds of Paradise? Oh, good for you. You know, Vorinclex.
But you can control it with stuff like a Forbidden Orchard, which hands out 1/1s to people when you tap it.
Or a Feldergriff that doesn't have a Karuga companion or something like that. You're just like, here, take some creatures. And then I get
and then I get a Consecrated Sphinx.
That's fantastic.
Come on.
You mentioned earlier about having cards that that are unique enough or that don't sort of trigger people a little bit. One symmetry breaker that's very popular, or one just popular group hug card is Howling Mine.
Yeah.
Howling Mine. Everyone draws a card.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Doesn't have that cool flash like the Dictative Crewfix that we talked about earlier, but Howling Mine is just solid. It's in a ton of different group hug decks. The way that you can break that symmetry is by tapping it to turn it off. You know, and one classic way to do that is with Urza. You know, Urza, Lord High Artificer, has you tapping any artifact to produce a blue. You can tap that, Howling Mine, turn it off, so only you're getting the advantage from it.
Yeah.
The problem is that people see an Urza and yeah, and they probably should. Yeah.
Don't put Urza in group hug decks.
No. So it's for sure, a Howling Mine can be a group hug card. Urza can be a symmetry breaker for it, but it doesn't facilitate your strategy because suddenly you're the enemy. You're no longer hugging people. Everyone mistrusts you and everyone doesn't like you. You need to make sure that your cards are ride the line between not threatening enough.
And especially in the early game, you really want your opponent's trust in you to be rewarded. Right? So to give them a gift and they reciprocate with kindness or not attacking you or with other kinds of resources. They don't want to be punished for trusting you with a very powerful card like Urza or even Vorinclex. I don't think if you have an Oath of Druids deck and a Vorinclex comes out,
you're absolutely right.
People are like, you have to die.
They're like,
you've immediately broken all trust that you've been working this game to build. But if you have something if you have a Consecrated Sphinx, which is obviously very powerful, but isn't something that's hey, you don't have.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good, what that line is for that.
It's very
big,
tight line.
For that big, oh my gosh, it's big, impactful, but it's also not threatening. I don't know. That's an interesting.
It's a tough line to walk for your Braids deck, I imagine, because in the early game, they know you're going to cheat in something scary. Yes. Do you cheat out your scariest thing first?
Honestly, one thing that's not good about Braids, but what can be good is seeing what other people are doing and kind of figuring out the table, because if I drop an Eldrazi that early, the Annihilator will take someone out of the game.
Yes. Yeah.
That early in the game. And so then the game is just kind of over, and so you do have to kind of figure out, well, okay, what kind of game am I playing? How aggressive do I want to be? How do I want to play it? A lot of times I'll drop just a big old 5-mana or 6-mana mana rock.
Sure.
Something like that's going to just kind of really just say, okay, I want to play more.
Right.
I'm not here to destroy people.
And if they put faith in you and are like, oh, we'll let you untap with braids and we're not going to battle on this, then you're like, you don't want to punish them by being like, ha ha, Taxius or whatever.
I did take my Jenga Taxius out.
Yeah.
I still have some Eldrazi in there because a lot of times they'll put something really big into play, and I'll be like, hey, I got to annihilate the big thing you put into play. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's this sort of answer thing.
It's a very tricky political line. And something that we're talking about here is controlling the hugs that you create, right? Mm-hmm. That's the next category of things that I think you need in a group hug deck is you do create an accelerated environment, which means there are going to be bigger threats earlier than a lot of players are ready for them. And you will die to them if you don't have an expectation. You don't expect them. So you plan, at least in Feldergriff, what I do is pack flexible interaction. Obviously, there's a Karuga companion, so this is kind of expensive interaction, but it can handle anything. So I like Endless Detour a lot. It's green, white, blue for an instant. The owner of target spell, non-land permanent, or card in a graveyard puts it on top or bottom of their library. So they get to decide whether it goes on the top or the bottom, but you can counter a spell. You can get any permanent off the battlefield. You can get something from your graveyard on top of your deck. You can get something from their graveyard on top of their deck to interrupt like a reanimation effect.
Yeah.
You can basically break any plan with this card. And you're ready for it because you know that you could be facing any kind of deck in an accelerated environment.
Yeah, I like that too because it's a little bit political, where essentially you're saying, okay, just not now.
Yeah.
And then, hey guys,
we're gonna have dessert after dinner.
Hey table, this person's gonna play something real dangerous. We might want to do something about it. They're about to board wipe all of our hippos. I put it off for a turn. Don't worry, everyone.
Yeah. That's the other thing is it doesn't counter the spell.
No.
You can have your spell, just not now. And it's a fancy regrowth. It's an expensive. I was going to say get probe, but it's a Noxious Revival.
Noxious Revival. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you can get your board wipe out of the graveyard or get a combo piece out of the graveyard. There's a lot of things that you can do with this spell. And that's the kind of interaction I like to pack in group hug decks because you have to be ready for anything. Mm-hmm. Mystic Confluence is another great one that I really like. You can draw cards with it. You can bounce creatures with it. You can counter spells with it. And it just is ready for anything for you.
Got it. When I have my because I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
We've both, when we've figured out group hug decks, we're like, look, if you're accelerating everything, you need to be able to answer it, control it in some way, or else everything's out of control and then you're going to get overwhelmed.
Right.
So one of the ways that I kind of like to do it in group hug decks is also do it in a group hug or political way. Mm-hmm. So for example, my favorite targeted removal is Wrong Turn.
This is great.
Removal. Wrong Turn is 2 and a blue for an instant. Target opponent gains control of target creature.
So you can't steal a spell with this, but you can take somebody's big scary thing and give it to someone who's friendlier to you.
Absolutely. Again, if you can guarantee that it's not being used against you, then it's a net benefit to give it away. Why end up in a graveyard when it could be turned against the player that was playing it?
So much more fun.
And so this is a way to remove the creature. You attack me, I'm like, it's not yours anymore. Rachel, here you go.
Yeah.
And again, you'd give me a pretty good favor if I handed over something great to you. You made a wrong choice. This is a wrong turn.
It's very gentle. It's like gentle parenting. It's like so many of these things.
We don't run with scissors. Here's some safety hands.
You can have the scissors until you run with scissors.
Exactly.
And then someone else will get the scissors.
So in the similar vein, Tragic Arrogance is a board wipe, but you get to choose what sticks around. So everything gets destroyed, but you get to choose, what's the one creature that you get to keep? What's the one creature you get to keep? You get to keep, your Birds of Paradise, your little dork. You can actually keep your big, horrible monster because it's not coming at me and we're friends. You know what I mean? But it still fulfills some of that board wipe potential.
Right. It can still answer multiple threats at the same time.
Even down to a counterspell, Arcane Denial is fantastic.
Love that.
You counter something, but you get to draw 2 cards.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I do run more interaction in Feldergriff than I run in any of my other decks, I think. how many pieces of interaction, or at least like something that's ready for a big scary threat do you run in your deck?
Oh no! Like, we need to do something
big
about
red
it.
buttons. Do you run in Braids?
I went through and counted when we were talking about it and asked this question. I run 28 ways to answer an opposing threat.
Does that include board wipes? That's like board wipes and interaction.
Yes, that includes board wipes, interaction. One thing that's good in Braids is that bounce works very well with it. Yeah. Because you've essentially helped them cheat something into play, and so bounce says no, not now. But 28 ways from all sorts of different ways to do it.
That's so wild. But I looked at mine. You said 28 and I was like, wow, that's a ton. And then I'm running 18. So I'm running 14 pieces of targeted interaction, including 2 free counter spells that are like big red buttons. Like, no, not that. And then 4 board wipes, which synergize with some of my win cons, but 18 pieces of no, not that is a ton in a commander deck, especially like a more battle cruiser, like lower power deck, like low, It runs Force of Will, but it's also trying to kill you with hippos it gave you. So
yeah, and I think that one way to customize it, and reason why I have so many different ways is because I found different ways that are political and like the wrong turn, or ways that really synergize with how I play this. For example, Mocking Doppelganger.
Oh, this is great.
Is 3 and a blue for a 0/0 shapeshifter. It's got flash, and you may have Mocking Doppelganger enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature an opponent controls, except it has other creatures with the same name of that creature are goaded.
Right. Part of the way that Group Hug plays control is it doesn't remove things. It makes it not your problem.
Yeah, exactly.
In Mocking Doppelganger is exactly that. It's like, you can keep your Eldrazi. I just want it to be not my problem.
And also what's super great too is that I now have an Eldrazi, and theirs is goaded, so it attacked someone else, and mine is just like like free to attack.
2 Eldrazi.
I know. It's exactly like I have 2 of them. It's fantastic. But you see how it goes along with the theme, but then also it's that same kind of targeted removal, or that way to get rid of things.
So those are definitely like interaction is a big part of this strategy, but definitely like there's other ways to kind of put a ceiling on how much value everybody's getting. Like there's certain group slug effects, or there's little punishy effects that you can combine with your group hug effects to be like, okay, you can have 10 cards in your hand, but like take a little damage.
Yeah. One of my favorites is actually Rurkthar the Unbowed.
It's a great option.
Yeah. Just basically it says if you play a non-creature spell, you take 6 damage. This is everyone too. So it's a symmetrical effect. So if you're playing a bunch of spells, you will also take a bunch of damage. But like if you give people a bunch of mana or a bunch of cards, they say usually like go nuts. Do whatever you want to do. You're just going to take 6 damage for every non-creature thing that you do.
Just be a little careful.
Yeah,
because Rurkthar hates them.
I also like Descent into Avernus.
I like any game with a Descent into Avernus.
Yeah, it's super sweet because it accelerates the game. But it also accelerates the ending of the game. Let me read it for you.
Yes.
2 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Descent counters on Descent into Avernus. Then each player creates X treasure tokens, and Descent into Avernus deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of Descent counters on Descent into Avernus. That's great. So you're giving a ton of mana, but also you're saying like, this can't keep going on.
Right.
We're hyper, like this game is going to go faster. You're going to get a bunch of mana, but also you're going to start off with 2 damage, then 4 damage.
Yeah.
It's like it's going to pile up, and this game is going to end.
Group Hug is like making a game hit the like speed up pads in Mario Kart. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
A little bit. And this one's like, okay, we're speeding up, but it's a tunnel of fire, and we gotta go, or the Avernus will kill us. Which is fun, because I think there's a reputation for group hug decks to make a game longer, and including something like this that also says like, okay, we're gonna actually keep the pace here.
And by putting like a top end on things, it does provide an element of control. Yes. Where it's like, hey, you can't do everything. Right. You can't do everything that you want. We're going to have an end to this game. And
I do think that we're talking about very different kinds of control decks, right? Like or group hug decks where one says like you can have all the mana that you want in the world. All the mana is doubled, but you can't cast certain spells, or you're burning life totals, that kind of thing. It creates this game where everybody's like, all right, use it or lose it. Let's go. Like, it's time. Which just changes the whole shape of things.
Yeah. Well, you want an element of control. You really do. And so you want to be able to, and sometimes it can be difficult when you're handing things out to get that control back, you know? So if you can say, okay, you can have this, but this is how I control it. You know, I'm going to control the amount of cards you have. I'm going to control the amount of mana you have. I'm going to control what you can keep on the battlefield. You know, you don't have to control everything, but if you pick and find out what your gifts are and where your control elements are, a lot of times you can line them up to have it be a more effective strategy.
It's related to control as well, but you also have to have a plan for not dying to this stuff. Like, obviously, you have control elements, but you're not going to be able to remove everything. You're not going to be able to limit everything. So having a backup plan for in case things do come at you, they're going to figure out what's going on. Like, they're going to try and kill you eventually. So you need to be prepared for that kind of stuff because you're not necessarily defending yourself with board presence. You're not necessarily defending yourself with creatures. You need something that says, like, you don't kill me yet. So I think protection is a big part of, or just any kind of defense is a part of many group hug strategies. The best one being, of course, Teferi's protection. It's hard to beat. You protect your whole board and also your life total.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when it comes to protection, also just having the presence of like, hey, you coming at me is not going to work. Like that might work as well too.
Yes.
Just being like, hey, I've got a Teferi's protection.
I'm ready for everything.
I'm ready for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's
So you need to have that in your deck to be able to have that, you know, threat or that ability to
For sure.
to say, hey, it's not worth it. You know, sometimes I think Josh has said it before. It's like the best counterspell is the one that I don't have to play.
Right,
You're just
yeah.
like, hey, I'm just going to counter it. Don't aim that at me.
Yeah.
And then you've essentially
Countered
when they
it.
don't
Yeah.
do that, they aim it at Jimmy instead. Your counterspell has gotten one value worth a spell,
Yeah.
and then it goes to the next person. Hey, I'll counter it. The same thing can happen with a fog or a protection effect or something like that. It's like, hey, it's just not going to work. Attack someone else.
Yeah.
And you do that a couple of times, and suddenly your Teferi's protection has been
really good.
Has been really good. It's been
Yeah.
passed, 4 times.
I do think that protection, these are going to be expensive instants most of the time. My favorite ones in group hug are anyway. And I do think that, like, we haven't mentioned it yet, but flash speed and being able to be reactive and being able to always have the answer and always have something to do is what makes playing group hug so fun, because you get to really embrace the environment where, you're like, okay, you decided to attack me. Well, now I have a response. And you have to have the response and the mana up and be able to threaten that to do what Josh is saying, right? To be able to say, like, I've got the answer for that. Send it somewhere else.
Yeah.
There's a new one that I think is really cool. It's Perch Protection.
Love it.
It's so fun. So this is a 6-mana spell from Bloomburrow. It's 4 white for an instant. Gift an extra turn. What?
It's a pretty big gift.
Create 4 2/2 blue bird creature tokens with flying. If the gift was promised, all permanents you control phase out until your next turn. Your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. Exile Perch Protection. So you get some creatures. You're like, I'm going to leave. You've got an extra turn. Go nuts.
I love it. Honestly, I love it.
It's so fun. It's such a group hug thing to be like, bye.
It's also such a big gift.
Yes.
Like,
what a great gift. I can make it so you can definitely take them out next turn.
Yeah.
Like,
you can do more with this gift because it's so big, but also it's like you don't need to extract promises from them. Sometimes you give a gift and you're just like, just don't attack me.
Yeah.
And that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
Right now you're like, I can't be attacked.
Yeah.
So not attacking me is not part of the deal. It's like, well, what are you giving me? Oh, I want to attack you or kill you. You can't. What are you really giving me?
Yeah. What I love about this is you can gift an extra turn at instant speed. So you can be like, okay, the next turn is the player who's super scary and is going to kill us all. If I give you an extra turn right now, do you think you can find an answer before their turn?
Oh my God.
And
I love it.
That's so scary. The player who's like going to win on their turn is like, wait, there's another turn before mine?
How did this happen?
I was not planning for another thing.
Oh my gosh, it's so great.
It's so fun and it's perfect. And that's how we feel about spells like Take the Bait, which is like, you attacked me and I'm going to give you a chance to redo this. And it gives them an additional combat, fogs the damage against you, and they have to attack somewhere else. Those are perfect for group hug, is using your opponent's board against your other opponents.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do have to protect yourself a little bit more explicitly with stuff like ghostly prisons and propagandas.
I really like collective restraint.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so good. It's basically, so it doesn't belong in every single deck, but it can be like an amped up ghostly prison or a propaganda. Collective restraint is 3 and a blue for an enchantment. Creatures can't attack unless their controller pays X for each creature attacking you, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Just imagine it instead of 2. Which, by the way, is very onerous sometimes.
Yes, is a lot. Yeah.
A lot of times a propaganda will just keep people from attacking you. But just imagine if it's 5. It just becomes impossible.
Or 4. Like,
I know.
You're just like, well, that's not happening. It's the difference between Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora, right?
Oh my gosh,
like, it's huge. It goes from, like, I don't want to do that to it's impossible to do
it's annoying to, like, can't.
Yeah. Which is a ton of fun. And those are the kind of things that when you put them on the battlefield, you're like, look, I can feel a little bit safer that there are so many threats on the board when I know I at least have one barrier of protection between me and immediate death.
Sometimes also people that need to attack will then just like won't attack you. You know, I'm not developing or holding anything up. I attack you. I will attack someone else.
Yeah.
And so sometimes sending 2 other players at each other is enough to like, you can manipulate that political environment.
When you become an inconvenient target, you become not the target. Exactly. Is a lot of how it works in multiplayer Magic. All right, let's talk about win cons. We've talked a lot about defense and control and making like things big, but these decks can win the game, and they can win the game in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
So I think that sometimes people rely on win cons that are just like either a combo, which works, definitely works. Sometimes goes against the spirit of group hug. I don't know. What do you think? Group hug is supposed to be everyone's happy, and then suddenly sometimes people feel salty when it comes to a combo.
My group hug deck is a combo deck, so I will say that. It gives away, it can give away infinite hippos. Which then you have to figure out how to capitalize on. So I can usually distribute infinite hippos, and I can either steal them back and kill people with the infinite hippos I have given away, or I can play a Dingus Staff and kill all the hippos and punish them for all of their hippos dying.
Fantastic.
Or you can play stuff like Azuri's Predation, where you give them infinite hippos. Now I have infinite green mana, cast Azuri's Predation, kill all their hippos. I have all these 4/4s.
Got it.
So there's a lot of... It's a combo.
You got some
deck.
hoops to jump through.
Are your
combos cute enough that people are like, oh, that's fun?
Because they're thematic and because they're hard, and most of the time I have 1, maybe 2 tutors in the deck. I find them with card draw and with overwhelming advantage, right? That I think they feel difficult and cute enough that it ends the game in a way that justifies that big crazy game that just happened. I think combos are hated because they come out of nowhere and they make a game feel like a womp womp.
Yeah.
And if you
not a satisfying finish.
Exactly.
So you need to make your combo have a satisfying finish.
And
if you want a big group hug game, this is interesting. This is good advice because this is something that I wasn't thinking about. If you have a big group hug game that's supposed to make everyone feel like this game is big and accelerated and exciting and we're doing more things and everything's amped up, then you don't want the game to end out of nowhere. You want it to be a big ending.
Right. And that's why I've talked about not really liking
Approach of the Second Sun is what you said.
Yeah, but like alternate win cons in... Like, I say that
some of them can be cute, though, and
some of them can be cute and difficult, and I do think there are ones that satisfy this. But even like Triskaidekaphile is like, you win if you have 13 cards in your hand. You're like, that's not that hard for me to do. An Approach to the Second Sun definitely has that feeling where it's like, I cast it, I draw it, I cast it again, the game's over.
Or like a Jace Wield of Mysteries or a Thassa's Oracle, where it's just like, all right, I don't have anything left in my library, I've done the thing. Yeah.
It
see what you mean.
It feels a little flat to me. At least those, like, you're drawing your deck to get there. You're not just, I assume you're not just like, if that's a consult, exile my deck, the game's over. That would be insane.
So what are your favorite ways to sort of win? Are these win condition cards or something like that?
I like big spells that either take advantage of all of the mana you've been making or all the cards you've been drawing, or stuff that like turn the game on a dime. It's like, now you have all of these creatures. I'm going to use them against you. So, because that feels very group hug to me. Something like a Reigns of Power is a spell we talked about in the Draft Gun Gotcha spell episode. And it says, like, I steal your board, you can have mine. It has a Feldergriff on it. That's it. and I attack you with all of this stuff. You've been benefiting from these gifts all game. Now I'm going to benefit a little bit.
And it's not out of nowhere. The creatures have been there the entire time. They're on the battlefield. Okay, I like that.
And it feels like it is sort of out of nowhere, but it is a development that is a direct result of the big splashy game that has happened. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like Inkshield has a similar feeling.
That's right. Like, hey, I've given you a bunch of stuff, you know, like you've chosen to attack me. Big mistake.
Yeah.
I Inkshield you back.
Yeah. Have I not shown you that I'm ready for this?
I like it,
and that I will come back at you.
That's actually one of the most perfect group hug things because you're like, I've shown you nothing but generosity.
And
I've shown you nothing but kindness. And yet you attack me with the creatures I gave you? Turn it around.
Yeah, like that feels so group huggy and very much in the spirit of the game.
Yeah, I like that.
So I think that's very fun. Insurrection type effects.
Yeah, I've given a bunch of stuff. Now insurrection comes and I'm going to be able to attack you with all the things.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But there's lots of ways that group hug decks have won the game. I think there's like mill is a very popular strategy, especially for like
that's right
decks that are trying to have people draw a ton of cards. Like Quain is like everybody draws.
Yeah.
And it's usually like everybody draws a ton and then they turn it to be like, and now drawing cards will be your undoing.
You've dug too deep. You've
Exactly.
You've drawn too much. I've seen this too. Like a lot of deck lists carry cards like Force Fruition, where we have 4 blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player draws 7 cards. You know,
7 cards there. Feels good until
you cast 3 or 4 spells, and then you're like, oh no,
I have 12 cards in my deck.
Or Folio Fancies. Players have no maximum hand size. You can XX tap. Each player draws X cards, or you can 2 and a blue tap. Each opponent puts a number of cards equal to the number of cards in their hand on top of their library into their graveyard.
So you can
just start
punish
milling them out and stuff like that, which again does seem thematic with the gift giving.
Right.
I am now punishing you for all of those gifts.
Like you have all of these things and it was lovely while it lasted. Even like Dream Trawler, which is sort of a classic control finisher.
I don't know. I wasn't thinking about Dream Trawler.
I love this card. And I especially like, we don't think about control finishers in Commander as much because you usually need more than a
this was
single
like a standard control finisher.
It is. So a Dream Trawler is a flying, it's a 3/5 with flying and lifelink. It's 6 mana. Whenever you draw a card, Dream Trawler gets +1/+0. And whenever Dream Trawler attacks, draw a card. And then it's discard a card, Dream Trawler gets hexproof until end of turn. Tap it. So you can protect it with all the cards you're drawing. It's thematic because you're drawing a ton of cards, so it's making your Dream Trawler bigger.
Got it.
And it only attacks one person. And I think that's a big thing about win cons with Group Hug is a lot of Group Hug decks are designed to make everybody else kill each other and then get down to the one-on-one and flourish there. Where it's like, now it's just the 2 of us and we know the deal. We're trying to kill each other, but I'm ready to be here.
My presence won't work anymore.
Yes, no more gifts.
Some of my cards off the top are dead.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you just have like one Dream Trawler can end a 1v1 game. And if you know that's how your deck is, like the end goal is to get you to this one-on-one.
Yeah.
Then this is all it takes to like actually close the game out.
Huh. I like that. I honestly I wouldn't be that scared of a Dream Trawler.
Yes.
I can see that it's value.
Because on its face it says 3/5 and you're like 3/5 can't kill me.
Like I'm thinking about like a Consecrated Sphinx versus Dream Trawler and I'm like, you can have your Dream Trawler.
Yeah.
Like also it's got hexproof too.
Yeah. It doesn't have hexproof.
I mean,
but it has hexproof.
Here's the thing though, the threat of activation is a lot.
Is it?
You don't actually have to discard the card because my spells aren't going to work. You're going to discard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I might as well not even point my removal spell at it.
Yeah.
Whew.
That's
a sneaky one.
I think it's sneaky. I think it's pretty fun. I talk bad about alt win cons, but I do think it's a thing that people really like in group hug decks because it feels sort of like I didn't win the game. I benefited from the game. So it does have sort of a group hug. Yeah, we work together.
There is one. I mean, is this a win condition? Let's see if this is a win condition or not. It's a Divine Intervention.
Yes.
6 white for an enchantment. Put 2 counters on this card. Remove a counter during your upkeep. When you remove the last counter from Divine Intervention, the game is over and considered a tie.
It's so funny. Jim Lapage hates this card because he's like, it invalidates everything.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But like, come on, really.
You put an 8-mana enchantment in play and it resolved and like 2 counters get removed. I consider this a victory for whoever makes it a tie at the end. I used to run this in my 5-color ponies list because Princess Twilight Sparkle's like alt win con was every pony wins the game.
Ooh,
so
like
this
that.
was like an every pony wins the game type card. And I think it's very funny. And basically, if you pull it off, I would just consider it a moral victory, if not a literal one.
And it takes 2 turns.
It's forever.
It takes so long. Oh
you remove it 2 full rotations for them to not remove it.
Oh my gosh.
And removing it feels so bad because it's a draw. You don't even lose. It's a ton of fun. Okay, so those are the cards that we're talking about. That's what you put in a group hug deck to make them work. I want to talk about a couple of cards that often get put in group hug decks that we think are more traps, and then we'll talk about playing it after a break. But let's talk about these traps first. This is a very difficult archetype to build and to pilot, and I think the traps are deep ones and sort of hard to spot.
Because I think that if you take the most popular, group hug cards and you combine them together, you might have, in most situations, I think you actually have a poorly functioning deck.
Yeah, you have a way to give everybody everything and very few ways to capitalize on that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about like sort of the signpost group hug card. I would call Rites of Flourishing maybe the most iconic group hug card ever.
Okay.
In my mind. Rites of Flourishing is a 3-mana enchantment. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Each player may play an additional land on each of their turns. So this gives all of your opponents an exploration and a Phyrexian arena that doesn't hurt them.
So this is something that we alluded to earlier, and which can be very dangerous, which is allowing people to have whatever they want. Because it's hard to rein them in. Giving them extra mana and extra cards, like that's a lot for you to control.
The way that Josh phrased it that I really liked in the Ms. Bumbleflower episode is when you're giving people cards, don't also give them mana, because now you're giving them both halves of the puzzle, right? You're giving them the cards to cast and the mana to cast more cards with. And when that's a very dangerous thing and makes it this very, very snowbally. And while this is a fun card to have in play, it's a very difficult card to combat if your goal is to actually win the game. If you're playing group hug, everybody gets everything and we're just having a wacky time, this is great. This is perfect. But if you're trying to win, imagine being on a board where everybody had a Phyrexian arena and everybody has an exploration. That is so scary.
Yeah.
Even if you have a Phyrexian reclamation, like a Phyrexian arena and an exploration yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's not like there's a lot of ways to break the symmetry in this either. Like, people are going to have lands and people are going to need cards, so it's going to be hard for you to specifically capitalize on this, because it's just, what deck wouldn't want an exploration in a Phyrexian arena?
I can't. That's how Commander decks works. Yeah. What do we talk about when you put in a Commander deck? You need ramp and you need draw, and that's both.
Yeah.
So I think this is a dangerous card to put into your deck. It's very difficult to capitalize on. But there are also cards that, like, Collective Voyage, I think, is one of the cards that gets referenced a lot when people say they don't like group hug decks, don't like playing against group hug decks. And there's a very real reason. Is the player to the left,
the person that goes next?
The person that goes after the group hug player tends to win, because they're getting all of these extra resources first. And it's sort of like they're going first in this benefit. And Collective Voyage is a good reason why. It says, join forces. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana. Each player searches his or her library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way, puts them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffles his or her library. So you pay green, and then anybody can add colorless mana to this, and everybody gets that many lands. Now, it's a sorcery, so you can only cast this on your turn unless you have additional, flash.
Yeah.
Which means that the person to your left untaps with like 5 extra lands before you do, before any of the other players do, and is in a very good position to win this game. Which...
It's a lot of mana. And it's a lot of permanent mana.
And you're not in control of how much it is, right?
Yeah.
If they're that player, they're like, I'll put all my mana into that.
Question.
Yeah.
can this just be a punishment against expensive mana bases that have not used basics?
Absolutely. I love that.
You're like, all right, I'm going to play group where everyone has these blinged out mana bases and stuff like that. No one is respecting the
like
basic land.
4 basics or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's totally fair. If you put a collective voyage in and it gets like 5-6 mana
hard to
into
control.
It's so hard to control.
If I don't have the basics, I'm not paying into it, though.
Yeah, and you're the one that has to pay. Like, you have to pay into this for this card to do anything. I
agree with you.
I think it's a really tricky card to control, and it's not an easy one to benefit from because everybody actually benefits the same. It certainly isn't the kind of card you put in if you're also playing Heartbeat of Spring.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I think that one's a bit of a trap. I also think general life gain is a trap for group hug decks.
Interesting.
I have a story that kind of goes along with it, but I was playing Congregate in Feldergrift for a long time. This says target player gains 2 life for each creature on the battlefield. It's like, that's great. I put a lot of creatures on the battlefield.
1,000,000 hippos. Yeah. Your life is going to go up to like 100, 200. Something
I'll gain like 40 life from this.
That's awesome.
And that seems incredible. And then you look at the life totals and your opponents look at the life totals and your life total is 95 and their life total is 26.
Oh, and they've got 26 hippos.
And suddenly they're like, well, we need to take you down a notch, don't we?
Oh, interesting.
And you go very quickly from being everybody's friend, we're all in this together, to
got it.
It's a very concrete way to see how you're taking advantage of the game. And I think it's just it doesn't help you for the threat that it adds.
So managing threat level is going to be really important. Like I alluded to this when I talked about the Urza. As soon as you drop the Urza, everyone's like, this is not the group hug I signed up for. Or you Oath of Druids into the Vorinclex. They're like, no. It breaks the illusion that you're there to hug people.
Right.
And then suddenly all of the hate comes on you.
Yeah.
I think that you did a particularly good version with Congregate because it's not even that good.
It's not even that good. And everybody was suddenly mad at me, and I was like, it's not even that good. And they're like, yeah, but you're an other now. And you're like, I'm not an other, we're friends.
Interesting. So it's a lot. So you have to pay attention to cards that will turn people against you, cards that are too threatening, or even cards that'll like be perceived as super threatening. Interesting. Yeah.
And hugging a little too hard.
Actually, I have something similar to this too.
Yeah.
Like when I play my Braids deck, I have Fast Man, I have a Soul Ring in there, you know. Oftentimes I will not play my Soul Ring on turn 1. I'll play it on turn 3 and I'll say like, hey guys, we're getting Braids a turn early. Right. And it'll be a conversation about Braids coming out, not a conversation about my Soul Ring. And I think that people are less scared of a turn 3 Soul Ring that just puts out Braids versus a turn 1 Soul Ring that's then ramping into other things.
Right.
So I have sandbagged scary stuff in order to be more friendly or be more huggable in the early game for sure. Definitely. So that does make sense.
I think that's a huge part of it. Like your primary benefit of being a group hug deck is that you're not threatening in the early game. So if you blow that by casting, a Soul Ring or an Urza or even like a Mana Crypt or something like that, starts to set off alarm bells, now your deck is just not set up to take advantage of its most primary part of the strategy, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
We are going to talk about how to play group hug. I know we've talked about it some already, but we got lots of more tips for taking these cards and winning with them at your next game night. But we're going to get to those after a few words from our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by Etsy.
You know, in a world full of AI and robots, it's nice when something has that human touch to it.
Agreed, Jimmy Wong.
You know, that's part of why I love Commander. Every deck is a bit of self-expression. Me, I love going for big damage.
I like card draw and card draw.
And that human touch is why I love shopping on Etsy when I'm looking for something special. Etsy is full of sellers who really pour themselves into their work, whether it's custom art, handcrafted furniture, or even fun, transformative card altars for your favorite legends.
Error, card not recognized.
Exactly, it becomes something completely unique. The Command Zone has found a bunch of awesome stuff on Etsy, from our Game Nights Live Championship belts to cool holiday gifts customized with our logo. And when there's a real person, you can often work with them to make sure you get precisely what you want.
Like a personalized message or a network connection lost.
Okay, you know what? Something is off with you. Josh, which of these squares contains a vehicle?
Error, this JLK unit will self-destruct in
What?
3,
No,
2,
no.
1.
Keep commerce human. Discover small businesses on Etsy.
Ooh-wee! The desert can be a harsh and unforgiving mistress. Toiling under the cruel heat of the blazing sun does a number on a fella. Even me, Yuma, proud protector. On sweltering days like this, nothing satisfies more than a cool, delicious sip of water mixed with Liquid IV. One stick of Liquid IV plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. And compared to the leading sports drinks, it has thrice the electrolytes that plant folk and people crave. Liquid IV can't be beat when you've had a hard night of chasing tumbleweeds, gaming with friends, or traveling the plains. They even got a whole posse of tasty flavors, including summer treats like popsicle firecracker or rainbow sherbet. My buddy Prickly Pear here is a big fan of the pear flavor. Me, I'm a lemonade man, because I always say, when life gives you lemon powder, just tear it open, pour it into your canteen, and make lemonade-flavored water. I say that literally all the time.
Indulge in hydration this summer with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code COMMAND at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code COMMAND at liquidiv.com. Tear, pour, live more. And then I'm going to flash out Illusory Ambusher. I will bolt it to draw 3 cards. I will sneak attack out Triskaidekaphile. I'm going to go to my upkeep and I will win the game.
That was your first time playing the deck?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first time in paper. I've already goldfished it like 100 times on ARCHIDEKT. Their playtester is super user-friendly. Playing cards just takes 1 click, and you can mulligan, tutor, and move through your turns with the press of a key. There are simple menus with counters and copies, and you can take notes on cards as you play them.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest Commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's archidekt.com/commandzone.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about Group Hug. You've built the deck. It looks awesome. Now it's time to play it. I think Commander players have a tendency to really focus on the cards part of it. That's why Commander is fun, is you get to pick what cards are in it.
Oh, yeah.
But I think Group Hug is so much less about the cards that are in your hand and in your deck than it is about the mind games and playing the people and like understanding the vibes at the table.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the big advantages to playing it is because it's not about goldfishing your deck, it's about reading the people. You know what I mean? And
it's
reading
impossible
the situation.
to goldfish Group Hug.
No, you can't. Exactly. Because everything's dependent upon that current moment, which also means that all the games play super differently as well.
Which is, why it's so fun to play.
Well, if the other people are important, you got to understand where they're coming from. You got to read the room.
Yeah, that's the first step with this. I think like stacks decks or combo decks or chaos decks, not every table is excited about Group Hug. Not every table wants to play super politically, and that is completely fair. So I think in your pregame conversation, that's going to be a big part of this. You're like, look, it's a Group Hug deck. I am going to try to win the game, but I want to play a political game, and I want to interject a little bit of extra. I want to change the environment that we're playing in.
Playing some Group Hug. Hope to make some allies here.
Yeah.
Also, letting them know that it's a little bit of Group Hug means that you're going to start being open to some political stuff, so people aren't necessarily surprised, or maybe you already started off the game a little bit less threatening. That could be good too.
There's definitely I want to be careful about the pregame conversation for Group Hug because I think there's a tendency to start playing the game before the game begins. And if you're playing Group Hug, if I'm playing Feldergriff, I'm like, yes, this is a Group Hug commander and I have Group Hug elements, but I also have free counterspells and I am trying to win with a combo. And all of that is on the table and that's not going to surprise anybody. Then once I get into the game, I'm here to you can start doing your political deals that you alluded to in the pregame conversation, because I don't want it shouldn't be a strategy to trick people when you're having a consent conversation. That's not fun.
This is only good. Group Hug. I'm here and I'm not going to win the game, guys.
Yeah, that's. I think people think that deceit is part of the pregame conversation to put jockey for benefit in the before the game has begun, and you're like, no. We all start at 0. Game begins when the game begins, and everybody has their decks.
Absolutely.
So just be clear and open about the kind of game you want to have, and it'll be a more fun game for everybody around you.
Not only is that a little bit weird, it can also backfire heavily.
Yeah.
Not to mention, are you ever going to play that with that table again, with your friends again? You're going to play that deck again?
Yeah.
Or are you going to do one thing that suddenly goes against what you said earlier on, and then you've lost all trust and 3 people are against you?
Right.
So it could actually just backfire, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next section is hug at your own risk. Choosing who you're going to hug is a very interesting part of playing this game. Because sometimes there's people at the table that are like, completely immune to your charms. You give them a card, they're like, great, thanks for the card, I'll swords your thing.
Yeah.
And if you know that about a person, you're like, great, won't hug you then. I'll spend resources elsewhere and that'll be the thing. So I think part of the early game is figuring out who is open to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to, Rachel, are you a hugger?
Like physically?
Yeah.
Not really. I do my best.
But you know people. They go around and they just hug everyone. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're a hugger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes if you're warned, you know. Like,
I'm a hugger. You're like, great. I'm less.
Right. It's just like, the hugs mean less.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you just hug indiscriminately, like the power of your hugs mean less and you're less likely to extract like favors from them.
Right.
If your hugs are everywhere and they're indiscriminate. So
they need to feel special.
Yes. Hug with intention.
Yeah.
Hug with meaning. Hug
with love.
Yes. Like hug with purpose. You know what I mean?
Like that's a huge part of this is making sure that you are doing things, you're making choices intentionally, you're playing your deck and making sure that you're not just rolling dice and being like, you get a card without really considering the consequences, because I think that's how people get frustrated with playing against group hug. So here's the question is, what questions do you ask when you're trying to decide who to like give your specific hugs to?
I think it depends on it depends a lot on the state of the game, and it depends a lot on the hug that you have to give. I think that, let's talk about from my perspective, like the braids deck.
Yeah.
I never play braids and just like go. I'm like, hey, so I'm thinking about playing my mono blue braids. I'm thinking about playing that. Does anyone have any good creatures, artifacts they want to sneak onto the battlefield? You know, what's going on? What's going on over there? You know, what do we want to do?
Is this going to be fun?
Is this going to be good? Is it got some good stuff to put into play? Like, and so it basically starts a conversation.
It gets people excited about what's to come.
Exactly. Gets people talking. And what I'm doing there is, number one, I'm seeing who's amenable to it, who wants to do it, who's interested in favors, but also who doesn't have anything to do. Like, am I going to get braids all the way around to my own trigger? You know,
so that's the tough part about braids,
is the giving them something, and then it doesn't even get around to me, so I don't even get to put anything into play. I just basically spent mana. My turn 4, my commander's dead. I've let everyone cheat something into play, and I get nothing. So it's a big risk. So I really need to suss out what's going on.
Right. I similarly am like, I'm not going to give hippos to somebody who has like a skull clamp on board, because those are like, you just have to keep an eye on like who's going to use the resources you're giving the most. Like if you're playing braids and you're playing against a dinosaur deck, you're like, okay, keep an eye on the dinosaur deck for sure.
They're going to put something big and scary into play.
You're like, mental note.
Absolutely.
Look for dinosaurs. So just knowing how like, when you're casting these things and having an idea for what's going to come down when you cast it. I think, knowing who isn't going to respond well to being hugged, who being like isn't going to be amenable to you, isn't going to give you favors for the favors you offer. And then just, I think I'm very careful about who I give hugs to, considering who I'm going to be able to play the best against in the 1v1. Like, who do I want to be in second place to?
Like, for example, I would really want to go 1v1 versus the dinosaur deck.
Yeah.
Because I've got a lot of answers to creatures, and your big dinosaur can become my big dinosaur.
Right.
You know, I do not want to go 1v1 against the control deck that controls better than I do, and that can counter my one big spell and has a dream trawler that I can't steal.
I know Feldergriff is specifically weak to aristocrat strategies because sack outlets are very difficult for me to. I give them things that they're going to kill, that they turn into cards or mana or something that I didn't intend to give them. So, and sack outlets sort of interrupt a lot of my win cons if they can respond to Dingus Tap by killing all the hippos that like in response. So you need to be very careful about like, okay, I'm not going to be able to beat this deck. So I need these two players or one of these two players to help me defeat that deck. Yeah.
And I think about a little bit later in the game too, sometimes you might have a good matchup against the person in first place, like the arch enemy.
Yeah.
But giving them stuff, being their ally, will put them too far ahead for you to catch up to. So being aware of the 1v1, winning the game could be really important for how you give hugs.
Yep. Think long term. Who do you want to settle down with? Managing threat level is something that we've been talking about all episode. And I think this is a huge part of group hug. Your advantage is that you do not take heat in the early game. You are low board presence. You are low threat presence. You're not a problem.
Absolutely. So we talked about the Urza, we talked about, don't, with the Druids and the Vorniclex.
Yeah.
We even talked about the goofy congregate thing that ended up backfiring against you.
Yeah.
So figuring out ways to get your game plan done while not calling attention to you can be really good.
Like we talked about not running Seedborn Muse because it's like Seedborn Muse is sort of a big ticket
And I wouldn't even
card.
known that. You learned that from experience, right?
Yes. Yeah. Seedborn Muse is great in the deck, but it attracts so much attention that the deck may not necessarily be able to battle. Like Rhystic Studies, Mothering Tithe, all of these are stuff that's like reminding you of all of the value I'm getting. It's like over and over and over again is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
To be like, do you pay the 2 for the card I just gave you? Do you pay the 2 now
keep
for the card?
reminding them, oh my gosh, you're right.
And it's just a peck in the ear that's like, hey, I'm getting something out of this too. I'm getting something out of this.
One thing that I like is a way to answer problems, but also minimize your threat is make it a group problem.
I love that.
And there are cards that kind of answer that. One card that I really like is a Druid of Purification. It's 3 and a green for a 2/3 human druid. When Druid of Purification enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player may choose an artifact or enchantment you don't control, destroy each permanent chosen this way. Suddenly, this is like, I did not destroy your problematic permanent, your problematic artifact. We did. We all picked the thing. We all decided, that basically makes it your removal spell, but everyone took part of it, reducing your threat level. It becomes shared problem.
Right. And that's another thing is like not going in for chip damage, not being the part of this. Like if you have a free attack on somebody and dealing 2 to them in the early game, it will make them be like, hey, I thought you were group hug and you're over here hitting me for 2 damage. Blah.
Yeah, it's not worth the 2 damage. The favor is worth way more.
For sure. You want you're dealing one of your resources. You've got cards, you've got mana, but also goodwill. And if you're trying to harm your goodwill resources in the early game, then you're fighting against yourself.
Interesting. So it's the real threat level, the perceived threat level, and then finding ways to deflect that while still accomplishing your goal.
Yeah.
That's a tricky balance.
It is a very tricky balance. So it's what makes the politics so difficult in this deck is like, because you do want to get favors out of being able to give people things, right?
Yeah.
But you can't be constantly wheeling and dealing or you're annoying. So you can't be like, look, I'll give you a hippo if you don't attack me next turn, because those aren't like equivalent asks. You're like, I don't even want the hippo. Like I'm going to attack you anyway. So
you're always attacking. That might be one way people get annoyed or something like that.
Yeah.
You put them off is by always saying like, I got a favor for you. Who wants to take this deal? Who wants to do this?
Right.
You become the game gets interrupted by your politics and you want the game to go smoothly.
Right. So I think like ways that I like to use hippos politically that aren't necessarily deals is like if somebody gets attacked with a big creature, I'll give them a hippo to chump block. Nice. And like that's not a favor. That's just it's easy for me to do and it saves them 6 life, something like that. I'll do you a good turn. And that is just builds goodwill without being like, hey, I'll offer you this for a little bit of this.
So the politics are going to be obviously they're critical because you need to extract favors from them.
Yeah.
But also it's tied very heavily to your threat level and how they perceive you. If they perceive you as an ally, if they perceive you as, someone that they're just getting favors from. And that's even tied back to how you read the room, how you read the person.
Right.
It was all intertwined and pretty complex.
If it's an easy gift for you to give, then the gift that they give back should be just as easy. Like you want it to just be effortless. It was like, hey, if I do this, great, let's do it. And I think there's a lot of that subtlety can do for you, where we've talked about like the council judgment is a great example. Like we solved this problem together.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. This player is the problem. And we solved it. Good for us.
We did it.
We did it together. And that like you just establish as a team at the table that you're clearly a part of.
Absolutely. You're helping everyone.
It's like, look, I can give you a few cards here and maybe we can handle this threat. And that's like, if I give you, like, if you draw 2 cards, great. then we can dig and try and answer this board. And now you've made them use a removal spell against a threat that you also had to deal with.
I like to do that with Skullwinder. That's one sometimes why I think it's better than Eternal Witness, is basically like, okay, so I'm getting the card back and I'm giving you the ability to solve this problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's, again, if it's not used against you, it's a benefit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Oh, man.
It can be so sneaky, and it doesn't, like, it can't, I feel like you get maybe one, maybe two big favors a game, where it's like, look, don't kill me. If you don't kill my commander now, I'll give you a turn next turn. Like, that feels like a big deal.
Yeah.
But you don't get to do like 6 of those.
So how often are you always extracting something out of your gifts, or is there a turning point where you're like, here's something for free, here's something for free. Oh, now you like these free things, you like these presents, and now I'm going to extract something. From
it. Oh yeah, it's definitely like the like a free phone game model. Eventually, you have to pay money to get the really good stuff.
Got it. So maybe you're even keeping track. This is a good way to like play the game. You're keeping track. How many favors am I asking from each of these people? Because you might. Theoretically, it's an unlimited amount of favors you can ask for, but you know internally, hey, I only get 3 big ones, or I only get 4 big ones. Is that kind of your experience? Like,
that's my experience.
I'm only getting
generally.
3.
And I I try and do like little deals that they didn't agree to, like giving them a chump blocker for that. They didn't agree to anything for that. But it's just like, hey, first one's free.
But solid quid pro quo, like you're going to do me a favor, you're giving me a gift, you're really getting 3 of those larger conversations.
I would think so, yeah.
That's a good thing going into this, knowing that means that you're not wasting, don't attack me with your elf, or don't attack with this. Here, I'll give you this. Yeah. Well, that might be one of your deals. And even though it's a tiny deal, in people's minds, it's still a deal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's very, very difficult to balance. And it's, again, this is part of the reading the players at the beginning and trying to figure out who is amenable to these kind of deals, and who, you find out throughout the game whose deck is maybe underpowered or not performing as well. You can be like, look, I have more sway with you because I know things are going worse for you. Or maybe you're like, you have more on board, which means you have more to offer me.
Got it.
So I'll give you an extra turn, you with the board, if, you do this for me. Is like... That's where the big decision points happen with Group Hug. And I do think the turn is a big part of it. Like, the game does change. Eventually, you have to be actively trying to win the game.
Yeah, I actually like this aspect in every commander deck that I have. Every commander deck, I'll have like the way that I want it to play out, and then I'll have a pivot. And I'll say, okay, this is my main method of playing this game, and then when this gets answered, this is my pivot, And so these Group Hug decks, the main thing to do is to hug. Is to hug and control, but then it needs to have this pivot point. It needs to have this turn where you suddenly are not... You're not hugging anymore. You're trying to win the game.
Right. The teddy bear turns into a real bear in the end. So I think there's 2 ways that a Group Hug deck can do this. It can try and shift very quietly and slowly and be under the radar until, oh no, they're the huge problem. What do? We don't have any of the cards to do that. Like, we've used all our answers.
Yeah.
Or their friends are friends are friends are friends are friends are friends are friends. Oh no, I'm dead. And so there's like a sudden turn. And I think that's more like the Inkshield Illusionist Gambit thing, where you have one card that turns the situation on a dime, or it's like much more covert, where you try and sneak into the win. Where
people realize that they have all this mana, but they don't have any cards, and the last board wipe, you're sitting there with the Dream Trawler going like, all right, so what are we going to do now, guys?
Yeah. Bonk.
I just want a little life game. Bonk.
Yeah. Bonk. Just drawing a card. Bonk.
even when people know you're the enemy, you're like, stop that. You're like, I really like drawing a bonk.
I just really need the card.
You've got 7 in your hand.
I want another. And that's a very difficult thing to do. But either way, like, you're not waving red flags at any point. You're trying to stay the friend for as long as possible until your deck is ready to slam the door shut.
Yeah, you're staying the friend until you're ready, or... like in case of Inkshield Illusionist Gambit, someone else decides, hey, I'm the one that's going to force this decision.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're like, okay.
Yeah. And then you're like, all right, the decision's been made. You're clearly going to come after me. Now it's time to turn.
All of this timing is so tricky, but is also what makes playing these decks so fun. And before we wrap this up, I do want to talk about playing against group hug.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is so difficult also. Because you're taking your deck, you're used to playing your deck on like a tennis court or whatever. You're like a regular clean space. And the group hug deck shows up.
In this
and
analogy,
it's like,
how are you getting bigger than a tennis court? Shouldn't you be playing ping pong?
Here's my thing.
Okay.
So you're used to playing on a tennis court,
Yes, okay.
right? And the group hug deck shows up and they're like, I brought a trampoline. Do you want to play on a trampoline? And you're like, I don't know how to play my deck on a trampoline. I've never done that before. That sounds a little dangerous and also pretty fun.
For a second, I thought you were going to go like, oh, we're playing ping pong and then it's on a tennis tennis court. You're like, no. Not fun enough.
Not fun enough.
Not fun enough. Trampolines.
Trampolines.
By the way, if you're good at playing on a trampoline, you'll be amazing if you can adapt.
Right?
Yeah. Could you imagine playing tennis with trampolines?
It would be
great.
So sick. And also you can, there's a whole different strategy to playing tennis on a trampoline.
This ties into the first point, which is just like, enjoy it.
Yeah,
like
have fun.
They've supercharged your deck.
Yeah.
Like, just have fun.
This is going to be your deck working at its best, right? You have extra cards in your hand. You have extra mana that you weren't ready for. You have more creatures. Just think about what you're receiving and how you can take best advantage of it, because you know the group hug player is.
Yeah. So if your deck is supercharged, then like enjoy it, but also find how they're ramping up your deck and then take advantage of it. So for example, if they're giving you extra cards, focus heavily on your mana development, because that's going to be your bottleneck. You know, if they're giving you extra lands, you know, get those cards in. Like if they're giving you creatures, you know, tutor up that Skull Clamp, things like that. You know, find ways to capitalize on what they're giving you so that you can take advantage of all that hugging.
Absolutely. I think if you can solve the problem the group hug player is trying to create, then you're going to put yourself in a really good position. You also recognize that the group hug deck is looking for favors and will give you favors. Keep an eye on what you're getting out of that, where they are, and like making sure that you are as tricksy with your deals with them as they are.
Got it. So do you just say, no, I'm not engaging in this and don't take any of their offers? Are you immune to that?
No, I would like if I'm playing against a group hug deck, I'm definitely engaging with a group hug deck. Free treats? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're taking the tempting offer?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So you gotta know the line.
Yes.
Okay.
I think like if they're gonna be like, I'll give you an extra turn and if you attack these players, I'll be like, okay, I'll do those kind of things. If I think I have the card that can take care of this player soon. If I have a trick that they're not ready for. So you need to have secrets too. Got it. What your deck is capable of. It can't just be all on the board for them to see. Which is interesting. You have to play them the way that they're playing you.
Okay, so you pretend to be their friend. Oh, you could be their friend, but there's a turn where they have the turn where they flip it around. You also need to be ready for that flip.
Right. Something I was thinking about is like playing against Feldergriff. I can't. If I was playing the dinosaur deck against Feldergriff, or I was playing dinosaurs against Braids, you can't really commit your best things to the board.
I will take them or bounce them or do whatever. Yeah.
Right. So you need to you sort of need to hit them with 4/4s. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I absolutely do know what you
if you hit them with a half board and they force them to use an answer on your half strength board, then you have more answers to you have to play against a control deck. You know?
Because if you're playing against a control deck, you do not overcommit.
Right, ever.
You play just enough where they're not efficient in using their answers. Because if a control deck 1-for-1s, especially in multiplayer, they will lose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The way that they get their card advantages by those card advantage cards, but also getting 3-for-1s, 4-for-1s, board wipes, things like that.
Right.
And so if you, again, just say you have that 4/4, use a board wipe answer. You know what I mean?
I will kill you with it eventually, and I'm going to wait.
Interesting.
You have to outpatience the control player, which is really difficult. And I do think that the tempt is just a bad deal. That is sort of the thing about
recognize the bad deals, like the asymmetry in some of these things, and just say, no, I will not be doing that.
Yeah, I don't need that.
I'll take that favor, but I won't be doing that, being able to hold that line.
Yeah. I recognize when you're not getting the full stick here. Okay, so there's tricky to play against, but it's a ton of fun. I want to talk about just when playing against group hug can be frustrating because there is a huge community of people that are like, I do not like playing against group hug. I do not want to play against it at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's fair because like I came here to play tennis on a tennis court. Thank you.
I did not build this deck for trampolinos. Just no.
It's unsafe. And I'm not ready today.
My ankles can't handle it. Play a normal deck.
And you're like, okay, that's right. Because you have to understand when you're playing the group hug deck, you are shifting the environment in a dramatic way. You're forcing people to play almost on the back foot and improvise. And some decks and players are very good and excited to improvise. And some decks and players are not interested in improvising and are here to play their game.
Yeah, they want to play the deck that they brought. And sometimes you're like, hey, everyone, I'm doing this crazy thing. And it's like, no, we're all playing. It's not all about, you and your new crazy board state.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think knowing the group and knowing the table and being gracious when people are like, I'm not interested in that wackiness today, is a big part of knowing how to play this and being successful and excited to play it.
I think also that some people might not even want to play against a control deck where they're like, hey, so the game plan is that things are going to be crazy. Everyone's going to have tons of resources. You're going to hand out hippos everywhere. There's going to be a million chump blockers. This game's going to go on forever until you finally combo. Like this is going to be a really long game. It's going to be long and drawn out and like it's going to be a control game. I want to smash with dinosaurs for a little bit. Can you bring out your dinosaur and we just smash together? Like
that way, yeah.
Like sometimes people aren't in it for this long, drawn out, complicated, or even political game. Like I could imagine people being like, my mental energy right now is quite low.
Yeah.
I would rather talk about what we're doing this weekend rather than doing all these political deals.
And that's completely fair. I talk with my partner a lot about beginning of the night decks and end of the night decks.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because there's decks that you can take out at the beginning when everybody's fresh and excited to play and is like will engage with your bandwidth and that you're ready to play.
Yeah.
And then there's decks at the end of the night that you're just like, you know what? I'm going to put Merfolk on the board. I'm going to put counters on the Merfolk. They're all going to attack.
Absolutely.
And that's it.
Yes.
And I'm not going to think beyond that. So, and I think group hug is a beginning of the deck style.
That's a great
beginning of the night style.
I think that's a great point, and that highlights, just not only just advice to play at the beginning of the night, but also that highlights some of the areas of concern for it. It's just like, hey, this is the style of deck that it is. Be aware that not everyone's going to like that style.
I'm not going to play it every time, and I'm certainly not going to play it multiple times in a night. Okay. Group hug's great and so fun. Why do we recommend that people try it and play it?
Oh my gosh. I like that. One of the reasons why I like Commander is that it is a group game. It's conversational. It's multiplayer. It's togetherness. I love Magic, but one of the things that I really disliked about playing like High Stakes Limited or Standard when I was playing it or really competitive stuff is that like I just wouldn't talk to my opponent. I'd like them a lot. I'd want to be friends with them. I'm like, please, let's be friends. But then the game would start and like, it's all about your game. And just everyone's silent and like trying to do everything exact. Commander feels so open. I like to do it with my friends and make new friends. So it's chatting and doing stuff like that. And so it's the community aspect of it. And every deck that's political, that forces a conversation, that forces people to talk about it, say, no, they're the threat. Or like, look, don't you see what she's doing with Feldegriff? Like opening up those conversations, those ways to connect with people is awesome. It's the fundamental reason why I play Commander. And so decks that encourage that conversation, decks that align with the fundamental reason why I play Commander are perfect for me.
And it's a kind of deck that you can do weird, big things with because the whole deck is designed to have a ton of resources, have a ton of mana, have a ton of cards. Everybody has a ton of mana, has a ton of cards. And that just means you can run more narrow effects that because you have tons of cards that like are good in any weird narrow situation. So it's really good with gotcha cards, which are very memorable, big types of cards.
Yeah.
And then everybody gets to show off what their deck can do in this accelerated and big environment, which is also really fun. And then you get to play this really challenging, really intricate mind game with like that takes away from like, did I tap my land? Did it like I should have done this pre-combat, or did I tap the wrong land? And I all these little mistakes we make in Magic. It's all the mistakes are so much bigger. because everything's bigger.
Big games are fun, you know?
Yeah, and
big,
memorable.
splashy things are memorable. And so if you have a deck that creates these crazy experiences, it's not only fun for you, but hopefully it's fun for the whole table.
Yes.
It's different, you know?
It's different. It fights on a totally different axis. It feels like a different board game than Magic sometimes. It almost gets like werewolfy or like, you know, the alliances are much more clearly drawn. So I think it's just a really fun thing to try. And if you're not a politically inclined player, then it may not be for you, but it also may be just the challenge that you're looking for to make more friends in Commander or to play bigger games, more memorable games. It's a totally different kind of thing.
On that point that you said, I wholeheartedly agree. A lot of times it can be very difficult to like talk to someone and be like, hey, let's be friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's hard, just in general in life.
Yeah.
But if you have a structured environment to talk about, then sometimes it can be a lot easier to have those conversations. So now you're not being like, oh, how are you? What are you doing this weekend? Let's be friends. It's like, well, will you take the steal from me? Like, will you do this? So now you're talking about the game of Magic. You have structure around it. You are more likely to, you know, be more political, break out of your shell a little bit, have more table talk. Maybe this is the deck that facilitates that, even if you are a little bit like, I don't know if this is the kind of deck for me. You know what I mean? Like maybe this is the deck that lets you be a little bit more social at the Commander table.
Yeah. Pick up the Ms. Bumbleflower or Precon. Give it a try. You can make the upgrades that we made or make your own upgrades or play it straight out of the box. It's a ton of fun. You can go check out that upgrade. Also, we talked about it a lot, but I really like gotcha cards in my group hug decks because they have those big game turning memories where you're like, you cast Mirror Weave and suddenly they had all it that betrays, all your hippos turned it that betrays, and it's bananas. Like those kind of things are what makes those big clear memories, right? So I think they work really, really well in group hug decks. So go check out the We Draft Gotcha Spells episode as well if you're interested in this style. And you did a Braids deck tech for us, right?
Yeah. A couple years ago when I was doing a lot of podcasts here at the Command Zone, we did one of my favorite decks, which was Braids. There have been upgrades to it, but it's still fundamentally the same. So check out that video. Yeah.
Lots of cool things to go watch. Tell us about your group hug deck to the listeners. Who's the commander? What's your favorite piece of hugs tech or even advice? We talked a lot about game theory and strategy today. I want to hear how you guys are playing it. One of my best friends when I first started playing Commander in LA had a Zedru deck that gave away like good stuff.
Oh,
like,
good stuff.
Like Titans and
I was like, oh no, Zedru. That you're gonna get some bad stuff. You're like, no, gave away good stuff.
Giving like Inferno Titans away, and the way that he would win games would be like, you use that Inferno Titan, stay busy. I'm gonna cast Rite of Replication on that Inferno Titan and kill you with 9 Inferno Titans. And it was just such a perfect group hug type of style. I
Very
love it a lot.
fun.
If you want to pick up any of the cards that we talked about today, if you want to build Ms. Bumbleflower or Feldergriff or Braids, go to cardkingdom.com/command. They have a huge selection of singles, sealed product, and they'll ship it to you professionally and safely. It's something that I really am frustrated by is when I get a card in the mail and it's bent or it's damaged or it's hard to get out of its packaging.
Just loose in an envelope.
It's just
How
loose.
did that happen?
It's just loose.
How did you think that was a good idea?
It's paper.
Did you tape the card to the inside of the envelope and think that was okay?
It's bananas. And I know that you can always trust Card Kingdom to just put it in a box and it comes safe and they know the different styles of foiling. So you get the cards you're looking
to
for.
make sure that they don't...
The peanut!
The little packing peanut so that it doesn't even shake in the box.
It's so nice that like they give you a box and the cards and a little token and a sticker and a packing peanut and it shows up how you ordered it. It's so nice. Go to cardkingdom.com/command and you can pick up some sweet cards and support the show. And then if you want to keep your cards safe, go to ultrapro.com/command. They've got they don't have singles. They have sleeves for your singles. They have deck boxes, playmats, binders, anything that you need to organize your collection, to customize your collection. If you're into Bloomburrow, go look at their Bloomburrow collections or pick up that Mana 8 product that I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. ULTRAPRO has these new Apex sleeves that are really, really nice. And they're doing art for like each of the sets on them. So keep an eye out for Apex sleeves. They're going to be really good. Let's move to the end steps. Talk about something cool outside the world of Magic. And you brought up something that I've never heard of before.
Yeah. So we were talking about group hug.
Yeah.
And so
yes.
I was thinking about games. We're all gamers here. We love games. And so I was thinking about a game that I recently played. It's called Regicide.
Okay.
Okay. And so here's what the game is and what the great selling points of it is. Okay. So this is a cooperative game.
Love it.
And basically we have to defeat progressively more difficult, bosses, and we're working together to sort of like defeat these bosses and then hopefully combine these 4 different fundamental powers to like keep us all together and stay in the game. So you might play a card that looks out for me and protects me, or I play a card that essentially has the whole team drawing more cards so that we can stay in the game. Here are the fantastic selling points of this. This can be played with a normal deck of cards.
Great.
The company that makes it has the rules and videos about how to play it just for free on their website.
Open source? Wow.
Open source.
Yeah.
They do make their own deck with amazing art. So you can buy their decks with beautiful art on it, but it's essentially just made with a normal deck of cards. And so if you're like, for example, we went out camping, we were backpacking, don't have room to build like commander decks or big things like that. We just had a normal thing. We're playing normal card games. And I'm like, hey, we've got like a cooperative, like Slay the Spire type, cool, like destroy card game that we can play together. Free with a deck of cards, open source, just boom. Start like using cards to like destroy the jacks, the queens, the kings, and work together to do it. So I highly recommend it. And also if you want to like just play it for free, download the stuff. They have the PDF on their website. Yeah. It's called Regicide. They're awesome. And then if you want adorable, awesome art, or to look at their like new Kickstarter that's got like a campaign series like that, that's extra too. But the fundamental game that's just played with normal playing cards is fun and awesome and worth just having.
I love that.
Yeah. Just like, oh, I got a deck of cards.
I love cooperative games. As it's like, my whole family aren't necessarily gamers, but we like to play games. So it's nice to have a cooperative game where it's like we're working together and it's not just like, I feel like a crazy spike sometimes.
Is it because Rachel goes out and destroys her family and then they're like, we're not playing Trivial Pursuit with you anymore, Rachel.
I'm terrible at Trivial Pursuit. That's my brother. But other games often, yes.
But yeah.
Because it's like, you just, when you play games that often that it's like a totally different level.
Names, you're like Thingamajig 6 and they're like, what are you talking?
Yeah.
Like, no. Different level, Rachel.
Chill out. And I am incapable. All right, before we go, we're going to say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Damon Lentz, Eric Lem, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Manson Lung, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Colt, Josh Leaquai, Jimmy Wong, and, of course, to DJ for taking the time to talk group hug with me for a little bit. It's a ton of fun to have you back in the office, and what a fun topic.
It's so much fun here. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Bye.
For your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeaQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.